So I feel like this is all a bit of a reach, especially for this song, but I stand by it. Hello everyone, my name is Candy. A little while ago, Taylor Swift released her 8th studio album, Folklore. And when I listened to it, I thought it was very beautiful, very intimate. But one of the interesting things I found about it was that it honestly listened like a lush, gorgeous short story collection. And I thought it would be fun to match a book to every song on the album because the themes are so rich and worth exploring. This is not an original idea. Gabby from Gabby Reads has done this video. She also did it for Lover. I will leave both her videos down in the description. There is also a YouTuber called Eric Mason who did a brilliant analysis of the lyrics, and that really helped me with matching the books to the songs. So I will link his channel and his video down below as well. This is going to be a little bit uncute because I've written a lot of notes for this and I'm going to be relying on them a little bit. So forgive me if I'm looking down. I also apologise if you can hear the fan in the background. At the time of filming, Britain is going through a mad heat wave, so I will try and edit it out, but it might be present a little bit during the video. So the first song on the album is appropriately titled The Why, and for this I chose Frankly in Love by David Yoon. Frankly in Love is about a boy called Frank Lee who is Korean American, and one of the only rules that his parents have set him is that he has to date and settle down with a Korean woman. So he forms a quid pro quo with his classmate and family friend Joy, and this is so that he can date the girl that he's falling for, who is white, and so that Joy can date her boyfriend, who is Chinese. But of course this becomes a lot more complicated. Joy and Frank start having feelings for each other and things just become a bit more complicated than they thought they would. I picked this book for this song because the narrator wonders throughout the song, had things been different, whether things would have worked out between her and her ex. She talks about the fun they had together. We were something, don't you think so? You never painted by the numbers, which is so relevant to this book because this book is about first love, and Frank and Joy do have such a fun and lovely time together. This song is also not necessarily expressing regret, but a sort of wistfulness at how fun and easy she thought love was when she was young, and I feel like this weariness has been generated over the years by the narrator stroke Taylor. And I think that weariness speaks to the narrator's stroke Taylor's experiences with love throughout her youth and her young adulthood. Like, she's been down this road before. When I read Frankly in Love, I thought I was going to get this fun, fake dated rom-com, and it is that, but it's also this very serious coming of age tale. Frank realising through these relationships and through other relationships that love isn't necessarily what he thought it was going to be. It's not like the movies, it's not like the books that he reads, it's not like the great love stories that he's followed throughout the arts that he consumes. It's different to that, and it's clouded by life experiences. And as much as he could look back on this relationship and see all the wonderful things, he can also see it as one of the ways that he comes of age. And I feel like this is what The One is getting to as well. It's about the specific relationship, but it's also looking back at the way that Taylor used to think about love and relationships back in the day. The next song on the album is Cardigan, and for this I picked It Only Happens in the Movies by Holly Bourne. It Only Happens in the Movies is about 17-year-old Audrey who is going through a time whereby she has gone through a really messy breakup. She's distanced from her friends and she's also witnessed the breakdown of her parents' relationship, and she just feels like an old cardigan under someone's bed. She just feels really bad and she's in a really dark place. At school, she's on a media studies course and she chooses to do an extended essay on rom-coms and how she feels that they portray love in an unrealistic and sometimes harmful way. It just sounded sort of hard to reach for me, who is a massive fan of rom-coms, even though I agreed with a lot of her points. But that's just an aside. To get out of the house, she also gets a job at a cinema, and that's where she meets Harry, who is very charismatic, very lovely, but also has a lot of baggage of his own. And the book chronicles their relationship and their time together and both their coming of age. I chose this book for Cardigan because this book really balances the state of being comforted by the object of your affection through Harry comforting Audrey through this horrible time in her life and helping her realise who she is and kind of reconnecting with herself. It also does a really good job of balancing that with disappointment and being disappointed by the person that you love. So those lyrics, a friend to all is a friend to none, is such a great distillation of Harry's character and really speaks to Audrey's insecurities about him. Exile's Great American Dynasty is a tricky one because within of itself, it's a fully told, fleshed out story. However, for this one, I picked Young Jane Young by Gabrielle Zevin. This is a retelling of the Monica Lewinsky scandal told from the perspective of the theoretical Monica. It's about Jane Young, who is the Monica of the story. It's also told from the perspective of Jane Young's mother. It's told from the perspective of the congressman's wife, as well as the perspective of Jane Young's daughter. And it crosses over a time span of many years and shows how the scandal affects the lives of all these women. The reason I paired it with this song is because I feel like this book is questioning the idea of the American dynasty, which in this book's case is the powerful political American family. And in the same way that the song talks about a woman who comes to ruin it all and had a marvelous time doing it, this is sort of looking at the idea of this woman came to ruin this man's life and his political career. Rebecca in the book faces derision from the townspeople because of the effect that she has on her husband, allegedly. It's the same derision that Jane faces in the book from the public, despite the fact that she was much younger than the congressman and he was in a much more powerful position than her. In the same way that the song is not necessarily interested in the men in Rebecca's lives, this book is not really interested in the men around Jane Young and around the women, just looking at the lives of the women and how they all kind of are impacted by the scandal and what the idea of this story and it being passed on down generations has. Yeah, and I just think also the idea of this story finally reaching Jane Young's daughter, her realising the effects that it's had on her mother's life all this time, is similar to like the moment in the story when you realise that this is Taylor telling the story and it's been passed on down to her. So I feel like this is all a bit of a reach, especially for this song, but I stand by it. For Exile, which is my favourite song on the album, I think I picked Normal People by Sally Rooney, which is a very popular book and show. It's about Connell and Marianne, two young people living in rural Ireland, and follows their relationship right from their school days through university to young adulthood. I picked this for Exile because one of the many reasons that Connell and Marianne's relationship struggles is because of their inability to communicate with each other. This comes across in Exile particularly beautifully when Taylor and Justin from Bon Iver are singing together, but Taylor is singing, "I gave you so many signs, you never learned to read my mind," and he is singing, "You never gave a warning sign, I never learned to read your mind." And it's just this idea that they haven't been communicating with each other, and this is one of the reasons that their relationship has completely broken down. There's also this implication that these two people want to be able to read each other's minds, want to be able to figure out what the other person is thinking, but they want to be able to do that without having an actual conversation, which is going to be difficult for anyone, but particularly for Connell and Marianne, who are very switched on, but not necessarily to their own emotions and to each other's. And there's also that longing and wistfulness and regret, which is very present in both the song and the book. Before my Tears Ricochet, which is I think one of the best written songs on the album, I picked The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is a coming of age novel written in verse about 17-year-old Xiomara, who is kind of just dealing with a lot in her life, particularly a very fraught relationship with her very religious mother. She discovers slam poetry as a way to express her feelings and as a way to process all the stuff that she's going through. Throughout the song, there are these lyrics that imply that as much as the person in the song that Taylor is singing about has a lot of hostile feelings towards Taylor or the narrator, there's this implication that they actually can't really live without each other. So there's lyrics like, "If I'm on fire, you'll be made of ashes too, and if I'm dead to you, why are you at the wake? You aim for my heart, go for blood, but you would still miss me in your bones." And I feel like that means that these people can't live without each other. As much as they hurt each other and argue, anytime they hurt the other person, they're inadvertently hurting themselves because of the love between them. And for me, this really reminded me of the very fraught and difficult relationship that Xiomara has with her mother. And part of the book's pain is dealing with the fact that these people can't understand each other. Secondly, there's this idea of her tears ricocheting. For Taylor, her tears ricochet and become these beautiful songs. Songwriting is how she processes the things that happen to her in her life. And in the same way, Xiomara's tears ricochet and become poetry. Poetry is the way that she deals with the pain in her life. Also, other feelings of like happiness and love and falling in love. I just thought that it was an apt comparison. For Mirrorball, I won't spend too long because I actually haven't finished the book I want to mention for it. The book I want to talk about is called Pretending, which is also by Holly Bourne, who wrote It Only Happens in the Movies. Pretending is about a regular woman called April who, despite her best efforts, can never really get past date 5 when she's dating a guy. As a result, she reinvents herself and calls herself Gretel and fashions herself after the women that she thinks that men want. I chose this for Mirrorball because I feel like this song is about having the ability to show off your best face and shine and shimmer. There's this lyric, shining just for you, shimmering beautiful, which Taylor sings in reference to how she wants her loved one to see her. But she also sings about the implication that this facade will stop eventually and she will break into a million pieces. I thought these lyrics were really suitable because this book is about hiding trauma and thinking that you need to bury all the difficult parts of you in order to be seen as someone who is suitable to date. Please picture me. For 7, I chose 2 books, Beautiful Broken Things and Fierce Fragile Hearts, and both of these are by Sarah Bernard. Each book follows a different girl in the same friendship group. Beautiful Broken Things is about 16-year-old Caddy who is very ordinary, very regular, and is very painfully aware of the fact she longs for a significant life event to happen to her. She has a best friend called Rosie who befriends another girl called Suzanne. Caddy's a bit cautious about Suzanne at first, but then they form this very intense, very loving friendship. Caddy is very drawn to Suzanne because Suzanne has a very dramatic life and seems to have a lot of drama follow her. But then she realises as the book goes on, Suzanne's behaviour becomes more self-destructive. She realises that Suzanne is actually dealing with the aftermath of a lot of troubling things that have happened to her. And Caddy realises that those significant life events that she longs for come at a very heavy price. Whereas Fierce Fragile Hearts picks up 2 years later and is from Suzanne's point of view. And Suzanne is in recovery. She's been dealing with all the things that have happened to her in her life and is facing them head on. She reunites with Caddy and Rosie just as they're about to go off to university. I picked these 2 books for 7 primarily because of the lyrics in the second verse. And I've been meaning to tell you, I think that your house is haunted, your dad is always mad, and that must be why I think you should come and live with me and we can be pirates, then you won't have to cry. And I find this so sad, but it also alludes to this love between Taylor and the person that she's thinking about being a very bright light in a dark life, which is definitely one of the big themes in Beautiful Broken Things in particular, as well as Fierce Fragile Hearts. What's also important are the lyrics, and just like a folk song, our love will be passed on, because it's Taylor hoping that this love that they have between them will be one of the foundations that they lay down to build their new life with. That's one of the big themes of Fierce Fragile Hearts, is Suzanne trying to build a new life for herself, filled with things and people that she loves and the love that they have for her, rather than building it with the trauma that she has faced in her past. Salt air and the rest on you. For August, I picked Don't You Forget About Me by Vari McFarlane, which is one of my favourite books of last year. Don't You Forget About Me is about 30-year-old Georgina who is having the worst time. She gets fired at the beginning of the book from the grottiest restaurant in Sheffield, and then she comes home to find her boyfriend in bed with another woman. And because of that, she kind of picks up the next job that she gets offered, which is as a barmaid at a new pub opening, and she finds out that the pub owner is her boyfriend from school. Meeting him again and other things in her life throws Georgina's present into kind of sharp relief. She also has to deal with a secret that has followed her since that time in her life. I chose this because August is about a short-lived summer romance, which is not unlike the one between Lucas and Georgina when they're 18, and it's just that, like that lyric, August slipped away like a moment in time. Georgina does see that time in her life in that way. She sees it as this golden moment in time that slipped away before she knew it really. However, this song, also similar to the one, feels like an examination of being young as well as being in love, as well as about the specific relationship. She sings lyrics like, back when we were changing for the better, and it implies that that time was a really hopeful time where things were still getting better and she still had a lot of hope for her life. Georgina, at the time when she was at school, was voted most likely to succeed. She also had a place at a top university. The book really is about kind of examining what happened in those intervening years and how Georgina has come to be the person that she is. Georgina kind of fears that she is the fruit gone mouldy in the bowl, as the book says. Such a brilliant, insightful and romantic book, and I really recommend it. It's a great read. For This Is Me Trying, I picked Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams. Queenie is about 26-year-old Queenie living in London, and she's reeling from a breakup with her long-term boyfriend, and she tries to deal with this pain by encounters with other men, most of whom treat her absolutely horribly. But as the book goes on, you realise that she is dealing with a lot of stuff from her past, and the book is about her like dealing with all the encounters of the men, but also reckoning with those things from her past that she has long buried. For me, This Is Me Trying to me is about Taylor, or the narrator, realising that the way that they've dealt with breakups and pain in the past hasn't served them, and realising that these coping mechanisms have actually hurt her in the long run. She sings about the process of coming to those realisations and trying to take active steps to make herself feel better and recovering. Could have followed my fears all the way down, but I'm here in your doorway, and poured out my heart to a stranger, but I didn't pour the whiskey, noting that I'm going through a lot of pain, but I'm going to process that pain in a way that doesn't ultimately hurt me. And for me, this is what Queenie's journey is as well, dealing with all the horrible things in her life, dealing with racism, dealing with a lot of pain, but also finally coming to a place where she does it in a way that actually helps her and helps her recover rather than hurts her. For Illicit Affairs, I picked Promising Young Women by Caroline O'Donoghue. This is about a 26-year-old woman called Jane who gets into a relationship with her very married boss. At the same time, Jane is also an online anonymous agony aunt, and the irony of this book is that Jane has a lot of awareness about this type of relationship and the damage it can do to the person and the people who are affected by this relationship. And in the same way, Taylor shows a lot of awareness through reflecting back on the relationship and realising how destructive it is, but not being able to stop the drug that worked the first few hundred times, as the lyrics go. Both the song and the book really explore the idea that this is a relationship that is also going to tear apart your sense of self and your self-esteem and make you feel like you as a person are not valuable just because you put so much stock into what becomes an almost obsession. Lyrics like, leave the perfume on the shelf that you left out just for him, so you leave no trace behind, like you don't even exist. For Invisible String, I picked Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. This is a beautiful love story told in two timelines, and it's about Elliot and Macy, who meet as kids and grow up into teenagers, and their relationship develops throughout their childhood and their teenagehood, and it starts off as a friendship and soon becomes more. In the second timeline, Elliot and Macy are grown, are adults, and they have become estranged from each other. This book is them reconnecting in the second timeline and revealing to the reader what happened to cause their estrangement in the first timeline. This is also a bit of a reach. I find it interesting that Taylor sings, isn't it pretty to think that there was some invisible string tying me and you together, rather than there was an invisible string tying you and me together. And I say this because I feel like if she was saying there was an invisible string tying you and me together, she would be affirming that her whole life and all the things that happened to her have led her to this person, and that's sort of why she went through all those things. Whereas when she sings Isn't It Pretty to Think That, I think she's saying that actually she went through a lot of bad things and they were really hard and they were really difficult, and I feel that she's not saying that all of those things were worth it. And I say that because Macy really does go through a lot of suffering in this book, and I wouldn't say that she goes through that in order to lead her to Elliot, because it is a lot of horrible things. I do find it interesting, the use of Isn't It Pretty to Think, rather than we were led together and tied by this invisible string. However, I'm not saying that Taylor's saying that. I do think that, you know, she does think that, you know, there was an invisible string tying them together. I just find it interesting, and it's sort of like a growing maturation of Taylor's view on love, as well as just being very romantic in the first place. Mad Woman is one of my favourite songs on the album, and for this I picked My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Brathwaite. This is about Korede, who is continuously answering distress calls from her baby sister Ayoola, who keeps on accidentally killing her boyfriend. Even though this book is a very dark comedy, a very, very dark comedy, Korede's narration thrums with anger. It actually covers things like abuse, exploitation, sexism, colorism. This quote from the book I feel is really suitable for the song. The most loving parents and relatives commit murder with smiles on their faces. They force us to destroy the person we really are, a subtle kind of murder. And this relates to Taylor's lyrics. Every time you call me crazy, I get more crazy. How about that? Mad Woman as a song is about kind of mocking the idea of policing anger, of being graceful in anger. And this book also really mocks the idea as well of anger being something that you can cleanly tuck away. For Epiphany, I chose Turning for Home by Barney Norris. Turning for Home starts on the 80th birthday of Robert, he's like an ex-intelligence officer for the British government and was at one point dealing with the troubles in Northern Ireland. The book is about him kind of reckoning with the things that have haunted him since that time, especially with the release of the Boston tapes, which is the leaking of information about that time and how the British government acted. The other narrative is his granddaughter Kate, who is reeling from the aftermath of a physical and emotional breakdown and is dealing with a very serious eating disorder, as well as a difficult and estranged relationship with her mother, who is also at Robert's birthday. The lyrics in the song really hint to not being able to give voice to the things that haunt you and not being able to give voice to the things that you've seen, and this is reflected in the lyrics. Just one simple glimpse of relief to make sense of what you've seen. I think she's crashing out some things you just can't speak about, and it indicates this great pain that not a lot of people will be able to necessarily make sense of. For me, this is what this book is about, and Kate and Robert trying to make sense of what haunts them. Epiphany, I know, is about war and also a dedication to the health workers who are at the front line of the coronavirus pandemic. Betty gave me American teen drama, small town vibes. It was so fun. I really like it. It's one of my favourites on the album. For this book I picked First and Then by Emma Mills. This is a book that is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, but it's also very reminiscent of Friday Night Lights, and it's just such a beautiful, fun book. It follows a girl called Cass, who's a very ordinary 17-year-old, going to Friday night games with her friends, and her cousin, who's very socially awkward, comes to live with her, who is slightly younger than her. Her cousin has this great natural talent for football and starts being mentored by the running back of the football team, who's one of the best high school football players in the country, called Ezra. Examination of a number of relationships within Cass's life. It's also about this relationship that she has with Ezra, who is this kind of brooding football player. It's very sweet, it's very witty and a lovely book, examining many different types of relationships, and I feel like it's a great match for Betty. Peace is one of my favourite songs on the album, and I feel like I'm saying that for a lot, but it's genuinely one of the most beautiful songs, and I actually think this should have ended the album, but that's by the way. For this song I chose The Infinite Noise by Lauren Shippen. Now The Infinite Noise is about Caleb, who is a 17-year-old high school football player, and he's also an empath, which means that he can feel the emotions of those who are around him, which can be very stressful for anyone, but particularly a 17-year-old boy who is going to a high school every weekday. He's particularly drawn to the emotions of a kind of like nerdy boy in his class called Adam. He's very intelligent and quite quiet, and his therapist advises him to befriend Adam, and he does. The whole book is Caleb dealing with his power as an empath and learning how to live with that. Also his deepening friendship turned relationship with Adam, which is so lovely and so cute and gorgeous to read. I think this is a great fit for the song piece, because this song to me is about loving someone very deeply but being really unsure whether that love will be enough to sustain the relationship, because so much is going on with you as a person and you're not sure whether those goings on will eventually be too much and will break the relationship. Lyrics like, "The devil's in the detail, but you know you've got a friend in me. Would it be enough if I could never give you peace? The rain is always going to come if you're standing with me." And it's just that kind of like, I love you, you're so wonderful, but there's also a lot going on with me all the time and it's never going to go away. And this speaks to insecurities that Caleb has, because his life is kind of crazy, because he's an empath and because of other things. But also Adam deals with mental health issues like depression, and he also has similar insecurities about whether that will be something that comes in between the relationship that he has with Caleb. I should note that this is an expansion of World of the Bright Sessions podcast, of which Caleb and Adam are characters in that, but they're not the only characters. The Bright Sessions is basically if the X-Men went to therapy. You don't necessarily have to listen to the podcast to read the book. I think you'll enjoy it without, but it is a really fun and good podcast.
My only one.
And finally, we have Hoax. And for Hoax, I picked The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This book is a retelling of the Iliad, but it's told from the perspective of Patroclus and chronicles his relationship with the legendary Greek warrior Achilles. In this book, Achilles and Patroclus are childhood friends and grow in throughout their teenagehood and their adulthood to become lovers. This is one of the best love stories that I have ever read. It's so beautiful, it's so gorgeous, and it absolutely wrecked me. I chose this book for this song because many of the lyrics allude to things like kingdoms and heroes and all of this kind of legacy being torn apart by the loss of one person. So lyrics like, "My only one, my kingdom come undone, my broken drum, you have beaten my heart. I don't want no other shade of blue but you, no other sadness in the world would do." And it's just speaking to this like very deep grief, whether it's a loss of one person or just wanting to be with a certain person even in your sadness. And that's all I'll say on that, so as not to spoil it for anyone. That's that, guys. Thank you so much for watching. This was really fun to put together and to film. If you have any ideas about books that can match the songs in folklore, I would really love to hear them. Please leave them in the comments down below. If you have read any of the books that I mentioned and you've listened to the songs as well, I'd love to hear what you think about the picks. Even if you disagree, I'd love to hear your opinions. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you're having a good day, and I'll see you in my next video.